Well, joining me live from Albury is the Deputy Liberal Leader Sussan Ley. Sussan Ley, thanks for your time. Well, overnight the PM has reiterated his position to consider offering peacekeepers to a so-called coalition of the willing in Ukraine. But he says a precondition of peacekeeping is that there's actual peace. What do you make of this?
Andrew, will always stand with Ukraine against the illegal and immoral invasion. We think, though, that when it comes to boots on the ground, this is a matter better handled by Europe. But I'm always fascinated by these comments from Labor because this is a government that couldn't even get a shipload of coal to Ukraine to keep them warm during winter. This is a government that cut up helicopters, buried them in the ground instead of sending them to Ukraine for military aid. And this is a government that hasn't even sent the promised M1 Abrams tanks to support people over there and to support this illegal and immoral invasion. So I think when it comes to Ukraine, it's what you deliver that counts.
So you don't think the Prime Minister's fair dinkum about this?
He's all over the place, Andrew. You heard him last week. Then some of his ministers tried to walk it back. Now he's joining a phone call and talking about what might happen in the future. I think, and Australians believe, that we judge this Prime Minister on what he's done. And I don't think this government has stood with Ukraine in the way that they could have or they should have.
All right, well, speaking about being all over the place, Sussan Ley, your leader Peter Dutton came on the show about 3 weeks back and said this about how the coalition might tackle exploding insurance costs in government.
We need competition, we need depth in the insurance pool, and we need to make sure that we're not being ripped off by insurance companies. And as we've done with the supermarkets, where we have threatened divestment if consumers are being ripped off, similarly in the insurance market, we will intervene to make sure that consumers get a fair go.
And you came out a few days later and corrected him.
We do not propose divestiture with respect to insurance companies, and we've made that clear.
Now, a story emerged during the week that you were saying what was in the opposition leader's office's talking points. This feels a bit amateur hour, Sussan Ley. Did you not think to ring Mr Dutton and ask him about his comments on it before you came out with that?
There hasn't been any difference in our positions or our statements, Andrew. There
well, you
really
just heard
hasn't,
the difference.
And I want to step it out for you like this. Well, let me step it out for you like this. What Peter said front and centre was, we'll always be on the side of consumers. Now, back to divestiture. When we were in government, of course, we enacted divestiture around the energy sector. In opposition, we've said that our policy on divestiture would encompass already supermarkets and hardware stores. And then we said, both Peter Dutton and I and others, that if we get to government and there is evidence of concentration of market power in the insurance sector and the insurance industry is doing the wrong thing, what you just heard Peter Dutton refer to, then we won't hesitate to step in.
But that's not what you said there.
And that's exactly where we stand. So there hasn't been...
But that's not what you said there.
I don't think you've played my full quote. Andrew, you haven't played my full quote. The situation as it stands while we're in opposition is, of course, supermarkets and hardware stores. We talked about that several months ago. We made it clear. We even produced, the type of legislation that it would look like. But we stand ready, and we make no apology for that. We stand ready to act with insurance companies if we need to. But these preconditions have to be met. There has to be a demonstration that there is concentration of market power and that they are doing the wrong thing.
Well, hang on.
And making these statements now is a good thing, by the way, because it puts them on notice. Andrew, it puts them on notice in the aftermath of the Queensland cyclone.
I understand.
That they can't do the wrong thing.
Are you concerned this insurance matter wasn't discussed at Shadow Cabinet or any other forum? Have you spoken to Mr Dutton about it at all?
Of course, we speak in the leadership group all the time. We have regular phone hookups. None of that is an issue at all. And I don't know quite why you're making it an issue, Andrew, because there actually isn't a cigarette paper of difference between what was said by Peter Dutton and what was subsequently said by me. And as I said, I've just explained that to you.
OK, so this is a policy if you get into government and find something.
Well, we will always be ready to act. And it was important, and it is important to make that point. We stand ready to act on behalf of consumers every single day of the week. Remember, We're living in a country where people are getting poorer every day under this Albanese government. I can't afford another 3 years of Labor.
Well,
when it comes to their insurance costs, they're worried about those.
Do you think there's a concentration of market power? Do you personally think there's a concentration of market power?
If there's evidence of that, then we will act.
Well, do you personally think, Mr Dutton's raised it, so he must think it's possible, it might be the case. Do you think it's the case? Does he think it's the case?
What I think, Andrew, is that insurance companies need to keep their premiums affordable and need to take whatever action they can in whatever field they're operating in to make sure that people who are affected by natural disasters can, number one, afford to insure, and number two, actually get their payments made promptly. Now, I'm not here to run lines for the insurance company or say they're all doing the right thing. I've heard some good stories coming out of Queensland. I've heard some of my colleagues who I keep in regular contact to. One said to me, I've got one of the insurance companies, I won't name which one, in the car with me. We're going out to actually have a look at a property. So all of the conversations that we're having, it's all about that. It's about keeping costs down for consumers, because it's... And by the way, under the Albanese government, with costs going up, that covers insurance costs as well. They're going up too. So let's find ways to manage the economy well if we get into government, bring interest rates and inflation down, and help bring the cost of everything down, including insurance. On tariffs, the opposition's position has been to continue to attack the Prime Minister for not flying to the White House to deal with this tariff situation. But isn't it the case that all these other world leaders have gone there, not had success in an exemption, and Donald Trump's happy to argue with them in public? It might actually make things worse. Might make things better for the opposition, by the way, but it might make things worse for the Prime Minister. We take no pleasure in this outcome, Andrew. We are bitterly disappointed for Australians that this exemption was not secured. I'm talking to you from the Riverina, beef capital of southern New South Wales. We're very worried about the future. Now, the problem here is that this is a Team Australia moment. This is a Team Australia moment. But where was the captain of the team? He wasn't there. He didn't actually go to the US. All of our AUKUS and Quad leaders personally made the trip to DC to furiously advocate for their country's interests. Did they get an exemption? We didn't even have the captain on the field. Did they get an exemption, Sussan Ley? We didn't even have the captain on the field. Well, we know the answer to that, Andrew, but I'm talking about supporting an effort that didn't even take place. There wasn't even the effort made, and that's the problem. You even just had the Trade Minister acknowledging, oh, well, I don't need to travel. I mean, he seems to travel, you know, frequently around the world. I don't need to travel, I can just kind of dial up. Foundationally, every country's relationship with the US is based on the relationship between its leader and President Trump. That is clear and consistent between the first Trump administration and the second. Everyone knows that. The President was elected 4 months ago. Inauguration was 2 months ago. None of this was a surprise. We were caught completely flat-footed. And I come back to my point. Team Australia, where was the captain? Not even on the field. Well, should have been on the field and leaving nothing on that field. Are you saying if you win government, you'll be able to get the steel and aluminium tariffs removed and stop other tariffs coming on? We will do everything that we did in 2018 when we were able to secure the exemption, and then more, because we won't be leaving anything on the field, Andrew. We won't be sort of shrugging our shoulders and saying, oh, it's all too hard, we'll pick up the phone. We will have the relationships in place, developed, working hard. We won't take a backward step. As I said to you, I'm worried about our agricultural exports. All of rural Australia, where I come from, is worried about beef being next. You know, this is serious effort that we want to see this government make. We support the effort, we just don't see where that effort is. Well, let's turn to this issue of when we're going to see more policy from the opposition, including on possible tax cuts. When do you anticipate you'll be rolling that policy out? We've rolled out a lot of policy already. If you look back on our leaders' budget and reply speeches, starting with the first one, there was policy. We've got a big, bold policy on nuclear energy. And it's interesting on nuclear, Andrew, because people often think of that in terms of bringing your household power costs down, and yes, It will, and that's important. But it's actually a game-changing economic policy for the next generation, for the next 100 years. It will enable Australia to take its place with energy competitiveness, an area where it's falling behind, and actually bring real manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, high tech to our cities, towns, industry and our national output. Now, all of that is falling terribly behind with a government that says nothing is being manufactured in Australia. So I want to point to that as a real visionary policy.
What about tax
I want to
cuts?
point to another one, which was our mental health policy. Well, as I've always said to you, Andrew, we will make our announcements on tax and other policies in the lead up to the election. We're not in the election campaign yet. We have given always a sense of our vision, a sense of our values and serious policy, housing policy, mental health policy, assistance, as I said, for Australians to find their way into their own home. And some of this has been announced, some will be announced in the lead up to the election.
All right, you've had an uphill battle to get the women's vote, the Liberal Party. There's been a couple of Sundays now we've seen health announcements aimed at women from the federal government, IVF and endometriosis on the PBS this time. Do you support that announcement?
Yes, we do, and I'm pleased to see the government continue our good work in women's health. An elected Dutton government will contribute at this point in time. There may be more announcements, of course, more than $580 million towards specific women's health measures. And I want to point, Andrew, to endometriosis, because 1 in 7 Australian women suffers from this, and for too long it hasn't been properly accepted by our doctors and by our health system. And I've sat in roundtables with women, with doctors, with those who treat this and other women's health conditions, and reassure them of our very strong support. So yes, I am pleased to see the government continue this work. I make one point about one of the drugs listed today for endometriosis, and it was actually recommended to be listed over a year ago, I believe. Now, I don't think it's good enough when the process is through the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee and you know, the sign-offs, if you like, to say, yes, this drug can go on the market, it is safe and it is effective, that a government would wait a year to list it. So I'm very critical of that, because women who are suffering should have had that drug available to them much earlier than this.
Are there policies that you're going to have that are good for women, you know, that are aimed towards them? I guess the government's jumped on this work from home policy, that's not necessarily good for people and good for women. They're pushing ahead in this area. You've got the contests against the Teals. Are there policies you think will address some of those concerns?
Yes, there are, but the most important policy for women, and this is not me telling women what to think, I sit with groups of women every day all across this country, is they want a strong economy. They know that their families can't afford another 3 years of labour. They know we have to get back on track. They know that when they're continually juggling rising prices, grocery bills, electricity bills, insurance costs, the kids going back to school, so much that they worry about, as often the women are the managers of their families' logistics and their families' happiness, and they're really anxious about cost of living, and that's the first thing that they say to me in any situation. So I think we must put that front and centre, and we are putting that front and centre in terms of our economic plan. With respect to the Teals, of course, they can't promise anything. No, they said they'd change Canberra. They came to Canberra. I think Canberra has changed them. And when you look at their voting record, and when you look at, as I said, the fact that they just haven't delivered anything for their communities, they can't promise them that people's lives will get easier. They can't back in aspirations that families have for themselves, for their future. It's very important when you talk to people who are considering voting for other parties. I say to them, if you don't like the way this country is going under this Prime Minister, there's only one alternative, and that is to vote, one, for the Liberal or National Party, depending on where you are. And then we'll move this government out and we'll give it a really good shot to get this country back on track.
All right, briefly,
and we'll succeed, Andrew.
Briefly, we saw news that power prices are set to go up. The bell's tolling for the time on this interview, Sussan Ley. We saw news that power prices are set to go up by about 9% next year. If the government puts up more energy bill relief or increases it in the budget, will you support it?
I'll wait and see. We'll wait and see what comes forward in the budget. Remember, this is a budget the government has done everything to avoid, everything. And they had plenty of time for their first three budgets, and what a woeful effort they were.
All right.
So I'm not
it's a
holding
direct
out
question.
much hope for this one.
Hang on, it's a direct question. We're nearly out of time. Will you support that energy bill relief?
We will see what the budget brings down, and we will make a decision then, Andrew.
Deputy Liberal Leader Sussan Ley.
Stay tuned for a budget and reply, because I can assure you it'll be good.
Okay, Sussan Ley, thanks for your time.
Thank you.